How's it going, YouTube? Coming to today with another video. And today, guys, what the review is going to be the meta tier list for the new regional season. We're definitely hopping into a couple YCSs very soon as well. Hopefully, a ban list very soon. Hopefully, we'll see no D-Shifter. That's a card that I just want to see gone. I hate that card so much. But I'm here today with DB Grinder. Austin, if you want to introduce yourself to everyone who may not know who you are yet.
What's up? I'm the DB Grinder on YouTube. I go over DB stuff.
Awesome.
It's really good.
We're very excited to do another tier list. I know the last one was a lot of fun too, so definitely a few different decks here, a few new decks here as well. So we're gonna go over a lot of these, starting with Floowandereeze. How do you feel about this one?
I mean, personally, I don't like this deck very much just because it has a bricking problem. But if it gets past that brick, it's a very, very, very good deck. So, I don't know, maybe in like 1.5. So I feel like 2 is a little bit weird. I don't know.
So I think that if I were to place this, I'd probably even want to put it in 2 because I feel like there's 2 reasons that I'd want to put it there, right? One is because how you were talking about like the bricking problem. But I think being such a droll heavy format, it's like, yes, you have to not brick, but you also have to hope that your opponent didn't open the droll as well. Like, that seems kind of tough, but I know that's just like a 3 of, but at the same time, it makes it rough because in 3 games, you're definitely getting hit by it at least once. So it just seems like you're at a losing advantage right now, but the deck is still very strong, and I feel like a lot of people do discredit it, but when you play against it, you're still kind of like, oh, it's this deck, because they still have cards like Storm, they still have Empen, it's still very strong.
Still a shifter.
Yeah. So deck still has a lot of really crazy utilities, so I could kind of see it go either way here. Just because the deck itself does have a lot of very cool options. I think that it is a little bit weaker for me than other decks, but I do think that it is still very strong and a very good budget option right now as well, to be honest.
Yeah, that's fair. The deck is just like all commons and supers pretty much besides adventure.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that is still like a little bit up there, but not super crazy. The next one here is Plunder Patroll. Now, this one is my favorite rogue deck. I love this deck so much, but there is a lot of different variants with this now that people are trying out. Even I was trying out like the Chimera variant, there's like the Runick variant, Adventure. I think this deck is very strong. I think this still stays in my tier 2 category. Just I think that there are other Runick decks like for hire that do it better. There's other adventure decks right now that I think are also doing things a little bit better, but it's still very strong. Where would you place it?
Yeah, I think like the bottom of 2 or top of rogue would be fine. I've actually started playing that deck a little bit too at locals. The deck's pretty fun. It's actually a lot better than people think.
It just spams monsters on the board very easily, and it's very hard to deal with after a point because there's just so much interruption. And then being able to put up the token on your opponent's board, especially against a Kashtira matchup, is very cool.
Yeah, I agree. I also really like the adventure build of the deck. I think stuff like Fateful Adventure works really well with like the plunder cards. I think that interaction's cool.
Talking about Dragon, though, now this is definitely one of the most popular decks right now. We're seeing a lot of results out of this deck, but where would you place it?
Let me think about that actually. Maybe like a 1.5. I think the deck's a little bit weaker than it was during Nationals format, just because stuff like Purrely has gotten a big boost. So I don't know. Yeah, probably like 1.5. I don't think I'd put it in 1 like I would have during Nationals format.
I would have to agree with you on that. I do think that Dragon would be 1.5. I think that it's very strong. I think that there's a couple different decks that just do it a little bit better right now. But I do think that Dragon is really insane still. When it comes to tier 1, there's usually not a whole lot that you even want to throw in there just because, you know, those are the decks that really do go above and beyond, especially at the moment. And I feel like Dragon is just a very solid deck, but it does have some flaws.
Yeah, I agree. Like the Bastille engine is very strong, but also if you like play against a deck where the Bastilles don't do anything, that's gonna kind of hurt your engine a lot.
Yeah, and you know, the next one is really interesting. We have Striker here. This is one that, you know, there's only so much cope that you can throw in this deck every format. I think this is one of those times where I probably just wouldn't play Striker. I think there's just way too many other decks that do too many things at the moment. But where would you place it?
Nah, I think it's fine in the wouldn't play. Kashtira Birth is just such a good card against this deck. It just makes it like almost unplayable.
Yeah, it hurts putting this in wouldn't play, but like at the same time, it's just you gotta be real about it, and there's just other decks out there that just do it so much better, and it's just not the deck to play right now. Um, Even talking about Live Twin Runick Spright, I think this deck is something that fell off really hard, and a lot of people weren't really playing a lot of it. We're seeing a lot more for hire. We're seeing a lot of like other different Runick variants. I'd still put it in like 2. I don't think it's bad. I think just other things overtook this deck.
I think it still deserves like a high 2. It's still like really consistent at what it does. I think that's what always gave it like it was always more consistent than the Fur Hire build, but the Fur Hire build's way more explosive if it pops off.
Yeah, I agree. There's just so much to do with the Live Twin build, and there's so many different ways you can go about playing the game. But I feel like there's just other things right now that really do overtake this deck, especially if you're playing like the Bestial Control Dragon deck, and then you have a Bestial and a Live Twin. It's just detrimental. So
Yeah.
definitely interesting. A lot of Dark Ruler in the sideboard right now as well. I feel like that's something that also just kind of shuts down this deck pretty heavy. So definitely unfortunate for that.
Yeah, I agree. Dark Ruler hurts that deck way too much.
So I know that a lot of people cope on Dark World. A lot of people cope on this deck, in a dual format especially. For me, I know that a lot of people are like, well, if you play against Dark World, it's going to be unfortunate just because if you have no interruption against Dark World, it's still an unfortunate time because most times the deck can be very consistent. It can break, but it still can be very consistent. I'm still in the idea that I would put this in wouldn't play. I still wouldn't do it. But where would you throw it?
I think Rogue or like wouldn't play would be fine, something like that. Just like Droll being in a lot of main decks right now, Shifter still being at 3. It really gives that deck a hard time with people just playing all these high impact hand traps.
And Bestials.
Yeah, and Bestials everywhere too. Every side deck pretty much. Yeah, just wouldn't play.
And if you're not playing Bestials right now, I've seen a huge resurgence in Crow because of Purrely. So I think that that's something that is also to consider. There's just so many options to go ahead and destroy this deck, so I wouldn't do it. Sword Soul is a deck that we've seen forever. Uh, where would you place it today?
Probably Rogue. I don't think that deck is very good. That deck gets blown out of the water by stuff like Talents and Thrust and Books and book. All those cards are like everywhere still right now. So I don't like this deck. Also, gets hit by Nib really hard. That card's gaining more and more popularity. There's like the low impact hand traps like Valor, Imperm, stuff like that. Those are getting more popular because Purrely. So I think like everything is just pointing towards this deck getting worse and worse right now.
No, I absolutely agree. I really don't think that Sword Soul was ever like super crazy. Like when they had Protoss, that was a different story. But right now, I don't really think that it's anything super special. There's so many other decks that I'd play before this, just because I feel like this just has such a linear play line too that it can be really hard into a lot of the different choke points that everyone already knows for the deck, and it's never anything new. It's kind of like refreshing when you play against like plant combo or like for hire, and then all of a sudden you see Sword Soul and you're like, all right, like this is fine. So I don't know. It's just like there's nothing that has been new with the deck. It's still very consistent at what it does, but I don't think that what it does is strong enough for the current format.
I agree.
Talking about the plant deck, this is always an interesting one because in America it doesn't really pop off, but in Europe it's everywhere. It's insane. The deck's crazy. So it's really interesting every single time that I have a conversation about this because it has the potential to be very strong, but if not everyone's playing it, I feel like there's a couple glaring issues with the deck. And it definitely has the ability to just go crazy, but the right timed hand trap can still be really hurtful against this deck too. So I would still put it in tier 2, but where would you place it?
I think if we do put it in tier 2, it should be like high tier 2. I think it has proven itself as like a real deck over and over again. You just have to be really good with the deck and know how to play through hand traps and everything. I also think like the deck gets into like really complicated game states a lot too, where it gets into like kind of like a grind game. You have like Petal coming back. You can like make Dryas, maybe Crash, summon an extra body from the extra deck. I think a lot of that stuff, like, you just have to play the deck a lot and just keep getting those reps in with the deck, and that you keep getting to those weird game states. I think that's really what makes the difference between like a good Rika player and a bad Rika player.
Would you place it higher, or would you just do a high tier 2?
I think like a high tier 2 is fine.
Would you go above or behind Live Twin?
I would probably go above it.
Above Live Twin, okay. I could agree with that. I could see that. The deck itself, I know that a lot of people in the comments are probably gonna wonder if that should be a little bit higher, but I think at the same time, it's realistically just a thing where if you're making a tier list, you got to realize that there's certain decks that you'd play before other decks, and I feel like when it comes down to that, it would bump it down to tier 2. At least the high part of it. It's still a very good deck. We're not saying don't play the deck. We're just saying that there are other things that are a little bit better than playing Plant. The next one is really interesting because I don't really know where I'd even want to put this because I've seen a lot of mixed results, and that's Manadome.
I would want that in 2. I don't know. That deck is so weird because like that deck when it goes first and it pops off, I mean it just wins. It sets up a really big board consistently, but stuff like Droll really hurts that deck. And then that deck going second sometimes also is a disaster. So I don't know. I probably want that deck in like tier 2. I don't know where exactly I'd want to put it though, just because there's so many good decks in tier 2 already. Like there's already like 3 pretty solid decks.
Yeah, I would agree. So like what bumps something into tier 2 for me especially, and I feel like this is the same with Plant, is when they have a really hard time going second. I feel like that's what really does make it to the point where I'm like, okay, probably a little bit lower than a deck like Dragon that can go second very well. So this is something where I would probably put it between Plant and Live Twin, but it also depends if you have like enemy controllers or like Droplet or something that really does work well with like the Live Twin cards. That's why I really like playing like the pure Live Twin variant over like Sprite and whatnot, but obviously now we have a lot of other things to consider, so like Runick cards and whatnot are really helpful.
No, I think that's fair, yeah. Just like the deck's awkward going second sometimes. Where like Plant is like consistently a little bit better going second. Just like Con and stuff, and it plays more hand traps. So yeah, I agree with that placement on the tier list.
So Marincess is also a deck that has like 20 flex spots. There's so many different things that you can do with this deck. I feel like it's really strong when you're going first. Going second, again, it's one of those things where you have to hard open like Pascalis or like your starter plus Spring Girl just to make sure that you can play through things like Book of Moon, which is always going to be really scary. This is definitely one of those decks that I think you still have to look out for. It's still very strong at what it does, but it's still just, there's other decks that I would put before this.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a tier 2 deck for sure. It's a strong tier 2 deck. A lot of people also like don't know how to play against it. I've seen a lot of Marincess players do a lot of illegal actions very consistently, and people not catching them on it. So that kind of like proves that people just, don't know what the cards do very well. That's going to help Marincess players do better. I've actually been playing the deck recently, and I've been doing pretty decent with it.
Also, I noticed the capybara.
Shout out the Studs group chat.
We all went to Minnesota, and there was a capybara like petting area. It was very, very cool.
It was great. I loved it. That day changed my life.
So talking about something else that I feel like changed Yu-Gi-Oh's life is Tearlaments. This is, Kit the One of the best decks of all time. Now it has a lot of issues because there is a lot of cards that are now on the ban list. Hopefully, next ban list we'll see a little bit less of that. But in general, Tearlaments is it's a very interesting deck. We've been seeing a lot of play out of this, and it's been quite the time seeing it do well even after everything. For me, I think that I would throw this into tier 2. The same reason, because of things like Bishals, Crow, Bell, just all these cards that are just doubling down and being able to hit tier as well. If you mill really well and you go crazy with that, then the deck is insane. If you miss on 15 cards, then you miss on 15 cards. Like, it just is what it is.
I don't know. I think I'd actually put tier in like tier 1.5. I actually really like the deck. And I think a lot of people are playing the deck with like Revolution and stuff, and that's actually just making the deck worse because it's hurting like the mills, and then you'll see people like mill 10, 15, and it's just awkward mills.
Yeah.
That's why I like the Shaddolls a lot more. Like something how like very close to like what Shuping was doing with the deck. I like the NAWCQ this year. I was really liking that.
Yeah, go Granganol and then dump Bob Cologne, Giskism. Very
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, that stuff's crazy. And then like the Baron Cross Sheep Schism, like that end board is just underrated.
Yeah, it is very cool. I do agree with that. I could probably see it going up there. We could put it up there. The tier deck, I feel like, is one of those things right now where it's so versatile because you could be playing like Mally Denier. You could be on like the Blackwing cards. There's so many different things that you can do that when you sit down against tier, you could know that you're playing against tier, but you have no idea what variant you're playing against.
Yeah, I agree. I also think something very strong about tier is that it has like a pretty decent matchup into most of these decks. So it's pretty versatile when it comes to that too.
And then if you land the one shuffler in the graveyard, it's still very annoying to deal with. The next one, I feel like we might be very similar on this. I don't know, because I know a lot of people lately I've heard some differing opinions. But Labrynth, I would put still in tier 1. I still think the deck does what the deck does. It's still very strong as far as having access to a lot of the crazy normal traps like D-Barrier, EEV. The normal line that I've been seeing now is like activate welcome, summon the lovely, and then you're able to flip the big welcome after so that they can't respawn with like Bell. So definitely some very interesting things here, but where would you place Labrynth?
Honestly, I haven't been liking the deck as much as I did before. So I was thinking more 1.5. But I wouldn't hate if you put it in 1. I do think it is like very close. If there was like a middle ground of 1 and 1.5, that's probably where I'd put it. So wherever you choose to put it, I'll agree with it.
Yeah, that's what I was saying too. It's like I've heard a lot of differing opinions on it as of late, just because there's other decks that people are trying to move to right now, and I feel like some people are getting off of like the Labrynth hype train, and we're seeing just other things that are popping up as more relevant. So that's why I'm also very stuck on this one because it's interesting, and I think just because of the research that I've done in the format lately and like what I've heard and what I've seen, I would agree to bump it down just 0.5, just so it goes to like 1.5 here.
Mhm.
And I know that some people in the comments, again, might be like, there's no way that it's 1.5. But realize that decks change like that. Like, it's quick. As far as like somebody plays a deck and they don't like it, or someone plays a deck and they do like it, and then we start seeing different results out of the deck. I think that right now we're on a downswing of Labrynth, and it's not a bad deck by any means, but 1.5 is probably where it'll be for the moment. Mathmech.
This deck, I don't like this deck right now at all. For a lot of the reasons that you said for some of the other decks, like Bestials, Bell, like this deck's really gonna, get hurt by those cards very bad. The Ishizus, like the tier deck can play it. The Labrynth deck, the furniture build can play those cards. They get side. A lot of people are side decking them, not main decking them. But I don't know. Mathmech gets hurt by a lot of that stuff. We're in a droll format too. Shifter's still in the format. There's so much making this deck just like not nearly as good as it could be.
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like for that, I would still put it in Rogue though, just out of respect for the deck. Like it can still do things, but I feel like if I was gonna play a Cyber's deck right now, it's definitely just Marincess.
Yeah, I fully agree.
Marincess is so strong, and it's also like $20 for the whole deck, which is kind of
Yeah.
crazy. But it is very good. It is very strong. Talking about a deck that is very strong, but have not been heard of in the past like 3 weeks. Kashtira. What happened with this? Like, it's still really strong, but I've just not heard a thing about Kashtira in a minute.
Yeah, I think everyone just wanted to try playing the new decks, learning the new stuff. I think a lot of people were just bored of summoning Unicorn. But we still see this deck get some results at regionals. That's another thing too, is like a lot of the regional top eights, they've been like, 7 or 8 different decks, which has been ridiculous. Been
Yeah.
a little bit wild to see. But yeah, I think Cash is still really strong. It still has like Shifter, it still has some of those really powerful cards in it. Still a very good deck. I think people are just trying to play other stuff right now.
Yeah, it's absolutely still tier 1. But it's just like, what happened? Just like, where did Cash go?
No, I feel that. I feel that has definitely died off a lot over
Yeah.
the last couple weeks.
I think what happened is everyone just sold it and they're like, it's gonna get hit. And so then they're just like, we don't want to have this right now. But I mean, we're seeing Fenrir everywhere. So, honorary mention, Purrely. I mean, this is just a tier 1 deck right now. It's everywhere. I think this is as popular as Cash used to be. You just see Purrely everywhere you go right now.
Yeah, I mean the deck's really strong. It is funny though how like on the tier list right now, like the first and second best deck, they both just get absolutely destroyed by like Book of Moon and Book of Eclipse.
Yeah, that's why people are playing 6 of them.
Yeah, but it's also crazy because then like against so much of these other decks going second, books just look horrible.
Yeah, you're gonna Book of Eclipse the Link monster on the board. It's gonna be crazy. Low key though, Book of Eclipse against Labrynth sometimes is even better, just because like they activate the lady and you chain Book of Eclipse, it feels crazy.
Yeah.
Obviously you're always siding that one out afterward, but when you have it and it's a situation, it feels awesome. Branded is an interesting one. I'm actually gonna move up the Chimera deck when we talk about this as well. So we do have Branded here, another deck that's been around forever. And then we have the new Chimera cards. We're primarily seeing Chimera cards being used with Branded cards, whether it's a heavier package or a lighter package. We can talk about these separate or we can talk about them together. Where would you place Branded and or Branded Chimera and or Chimera?
Okay, so branded, I would probably put in like the tier 2 spot. It just doesn't have like that much non-engine like it's always had, but its engine is still very, very strong. Then Chimera with branded, uh, assuming it's like a big package, because like a little package doesn't really change the deck that much. Assuming it's like a big package, I'd say honestly probably like the same spot. And then maybe Chimera without branded. I'm not really sure because like, is that just like a pure Chimera deck, like with nothing else in it?
So there are a couple different variants where it's like Chimera with a lot of hand traps, and then you play like 3 fusion, or at least in mine too, is 3 fusion and 2 Albaz. And we're seeing some people who are doing like 3 fusion, 2 Albaz, 1 Spriggan's Kit, 1 branded in white. So it's like a really small package. And then there's like a lot of different variants like Runick Chimera, or there's like just the standard engine with patchwork and a lot of hand traps.
Yeah, I think it's probably just like more like a standard version with a bunch of hand traps or like a little branded package in it. I think that is like fine. That's probably like, I think it's probably all the branded and all the Chimera builds are probably just in tier 2. I think they're all like pretty solid. The Chimera stuff, it's a little bit rough too, just because people are playing more hand traps, and hand traps do hurt that engine pretty bad. Like Ash on Sword Knight, or like Imper Moonlit Veiler on Big Winged, and that can hurt a lot.
Definitely a lot of hand traps that really do hurt. Droll especially. Droll's really rough. That's something that you really got to consider when you're playing the deck. Ash on Sword Knight, rough. Getting Imperm Veiler on Baphomet, also very rough. So a lot of things that you really got to consider when you play a deck like that. I said this in the last tier list that I did, that Branded's probably tier 2, and I know a lot of people were not happy with that, but I do think that it is just tier 2. I don't think that it does anything super crazy. I do like when you play like the branded cards with Chimera cards, you have like 19 free engine spots. And in branded, that's just never heard of. You have like 4, maybe 5, which is just awful, because at that point you're just like hoping your engine does enough, which sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But overall, I think that branded is a little bit weaker. I do think the Chimera cards are cool, but they do struggle against quite a bit. Talking about Gold Punk Pride. So this is definitely an interesting deck. It's something that for me, I'd put this in Rogue or wouldn't play. This has been tier 2 for too long and hasn't done anything. And I think that at least now, without any more support, I wouldn't keep trying to run the deck at the moment.
Yeah, I would definitely put the deck into Rogue. The deck, I don't know why people played the deck, to be honest. The whole deck seemed not that great, except for the like the trap, like the starting your engines. That card always seemed kind of nice.
That card's broken.
Yeah, but it's like I don't know. The rest of the deck just seemed that great.
Yeah,
At least that's my opinion.
no, I completely agree. I 100% agree on that. I think that the deck has always not been super great. Every single time I play against it, I'm like, wow, this deck just is not that good. Talking about another deck that I feel like always falls to the wayside, Melffy Spright. This is one that definitely gets shadowed by For Hire, gets shadowed by Live Twin, but it has put up results. But where would you place this?
This is probably like the definition of like the bottom of like a tier 2 deck. Just because this deck has like sprite cards in it, it can play adventure cards in it can play Fenrir in it can play hand traps in it, go in second cards. So this deck's like, I don't know, it's always gonna be like decent against everything. Just because of how it can be built. And its end board is really strong, and it puts the opponent on have non-engine. So I think this is like a perfect bottom of tier 2 deck.
So for the next one here, we have Traptrix, and I think this deck has been cope since the start. I do not like this deck. I know that some people still play it, and that it still has some ability to play, but this would be between Rogue and wouldn't play for me as well. I think there's just any other reason in the world to play Labrynth over this deck. Like, if I'm playing a back row deck right now, it's literally just Labrynth, 100%.
Yeah, 100%. Like I'm never playing Traptrix. I'll put that in wouldn't play.
Yeah, absolutely. When there's just an overshining, like, this is the deck to play over this deck, it's just like when I look at Marincess versus Mathmech, and I'm like, there's no shot that you'd find me playing Mathmech over Marincess right now. It wouldn't happen. But talking about a deck that I feel like also kind of came and went as far as being pretty cope. Started off doing really well, and now a lot of people just kind of don't play it, but it still does results here and there, is VS. Definitely an interesting deck, and I'd be curious to know where you'd place this.
This is rough because I really don't like this deck.
Same.
At all. The deck has it seems like it has very bad consistency problems. You have to play like a bunch of different attributes to make the deck work. So then you have to play like awkward cards in your deck. Like I just don't like this deck at all. I'm not gonna lie. I think like to respect it a little bit, maybe like top or Rogue, or maybe near the bottom of tier 2, just because it can play so much non-engine in it.
I would probably put this at the bottom of tier 2, but I don't think anything higher is warranted on that.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Once the engine gets rolling, it's strong. It's really strong once the engine's rolling.
Talking about the Adventure Synchron deck, I don't really have much of an opinion on this deck, just because it hasn't really done anything. It's interesting. It's definitely interesting. But I probably, again, would be Rogue, wouldn't play, one of the two. You really have to hope that you put up some kind of negation before you get hand trapped on Junk Speeder, or else it's just GG's in the chat. And that's something where I probably wouldn't even want to risk it.
Yeah, I tested that deck a lot, and I think going first, the deck's like insane. Like it almost just never loses going first. But going second, it feels like you can never win. Even if you have a bunch of hand traps to stop the opponent, you still just have like a bunch of these random like synchro tuners in your hand that like the synchron tuners that just don't do anything. You really just have to have right resolve and have like the token stay on the field for you to do anything going second.
Yeah, so for me at least, I would put this in wouldn't play. I don't know if anyone else would throw this anywhere different. Where would you throw this?
I would throw it in Rogue. I really like these. I mean, it's not a very good deck. It's not very good. It's just good going first.
I think for what you said too, just being like, this is a deck that literally can't go second. I think that's for me. That's it for me. Like there are decks that struggle going second, but if a deck literally just cannot play going second, I'm out. Like, I can't do it. Can't risk it, you know? Infernoble. This is another one that I feel like a lot of people were hyped up on just because before, you know, getting Imperm down to Rorodon wasn't enough, so now it's round 2. We have this new variant of the deck with the new Link one, which is very cool. It's like, I think it's a double pop and a spell trap negation. Definitely very interesting, but I don't think this is anything more than Rogue. But where would you put it?
I would actually put this deck near like high tier 2, just because it's a big combo deck. Like, I think, I don't know, like it does big combos. Its end board is like decent enough. You can try to end with like monster negate, pop, like 2 spell trap negates, and then just like a bunch of follow up. So I think like its turn 1 is strong enough. People are starting to actually put some going second cards into the deck and make it better going second. I think the deck actually has a good amount of potential. Pretty much everything I just said. The deck has a lot of potential. I think that's it.
I'll split the difference with you and I'll put it like the bottom of tier 2.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
I need to see more out of the deck before I'm like, okay, like this deck
Mhm.
is fire. Talking about a deck that I did not think that we'd be talking about in terms of doing very well, Unchained. This is a deck that I've seen do very well so far as the new cards come out, and it has a lot of resiliency. The only problem is breaking. I've seen that happen a few times with the deck. But overall, I think that being able to dodge Valor and Imperm, especially on Tour Guy, is kind of crazy. Because if you open up the level 6 fire and you go Tour Guide effect, the Imperm, you chain it, pop it, it's like pretty neat. The deck itself is really kind of rough to deal with, but at the same time, evenly cooks this deck, Nib cooks this deck. There's a lot of situations where you can do very well against this. But how do you feel about the deck?
So I personally, I would say evenly doesn't cook the deck. I think Nib cooks. I think that card cooks bad. That card cooks this deck bad. But I think this deck's actually pretty high up.
Yeah.
Like I would argue like this is in like tier 1.5 right now, and maybe like behind Labrynth, ahead of Dragon Link, like right around there. I think the deck is strong. It plays through hand traps well. Besides like Nib, um, Droll doesn't really hurt the deck that much. It can play through Ash and stuff. I think if the deck does get more and more popular, people could side deck more specific stuff for it, like Skullmeister. But right now, I think the deck's in a pretty strong spot in the format.
Yeah, I think this deck is crazy strong. Again, I played against it quite a few times, and there's a lot of situations where, you know, you have an Axis card on board, but they have an Unchained monster, and it gets tough. So it's something that you really got to consider. You got to be prepared for this deck. You have to know that if you hand trap in one spot, usually means that they can just bring out something else. Or like if you, for example, like hand trap one card and then like that's cool, summon Yama effect, grab another one, like the deck itself is super consistent. It's very cool. I called the level 6 water and the level 6 fire and ice hand because they're just like the new retrains of that in my opinion, which is very cool just because they self-replace themselves, which is also really nice. But Unchained, very scary deck right now. Make sure you're ready for it. Very good deck. It's also pretty cheap right now. I'm pretty sure it's definitely interesting. For hire, we've talked about this deck quite often today. This is probably just another 1.5 deck at the moment. I think it's very strong. Just for what it does, very explosive as far as Runick variants go, and then Runick just has a lot of coverage into a lot of matchups.
Yeah, I think that's a fair spot for it.
So
It's just the best Runick deck.
this last one here, I've seen mixed results. I've seen it do very well. I've seen it do very, very well in the regional circuit. I've seen the deck brick, but not a whole lot. But I've definitely heard a lot of theory with the deck too. Rescue Ace is a deck that I personally don't love. I don't think the deck is like super crazy. I don't struggle too bad against it when I play against it. But there are turns where they do just tier limit you. Like they summon 3-4 monsters on your turn, and you're like, oh, like that's cool. And then they airlifter, they're able to draw a couple cards. It's pretty nice because they have their own Heavenly Dragon Circle too, and Emergency. Definitely a lot of cool things with the deck. But where would you place this?
I'd want to put this in like tier 2. I don't like the deck that much. Like, I don't know, it seems like a lot of the cards seem broken, like Turbulence. Like Impulse is just kind of like a haveness. But I don't know. The deck just feels so weird. Like one Ash Blossom on Emergency like consistently hurts like your soul when you play this deck. And just like hand traps on Airlifters. So I didn't like the deck that much. But I think deck list will keep getting improved. Decks are gonna keep getting better for Rescue Ace decks. So I think that's gonna make the deck keep getting better and better once people learn how to build it better and better.
Yeah, I definitely think that the deck itself has a lot of potential. Being at tier 2, I could definitely agree with that, just because again, I've seen the deck do very well, but I also feel like the more that it does well, the more that people understand how to play against it, and the more understanding versus a lot of the different decks in this format are going to be. And maybe this deck just isn't as good as it is. So we'll have to wait and see after like way more results. Because again, it really depends like what you're playing against the deck as well. But it can spam the board very well, recycle all the traps that it's setting. Definitely a very cool deck. But I don't know if it's better than anything that we put up in like 1.5.
Yeah, I'd probably would play all of the 1.5 decks over Rescue Ace. Except maybe like I'd play Rescue Ace over maybe like a for hire Runick deck, but that's just because I don't want to play that many Runick decks right now.
Yeah, Droll is interesting. There's a lot of situations where Runick just falls a little flat.
Yeah, I'm just not trying to go second, and my opponent's just like playing Purrely, and like I just like have to have like one of my like flashing fires to hope I can out the rank 2. Otherwise, they summon a towers on me and like draw 4.
Yeah, that's also very unfortunate. And then you're only playing 3 hand traps, then it's like, yikes.
Yeah, it's a little bit rough. It's a little bit rough.
Yeah, for one deck only having 3 flex spots is kind of like, okay, like that's just not that good. But I'm pretty happy with the tier list. It looks good to me. Any final thoughts on it?
No, I think it looks fine. I think the top decks are just Cash and Purrely for sure right now.
Yeah, Unchained, definitely an interesting deck that just kind of popped up and now it's doing very well. Well, if you haven't already checked out DB Grinder's channel, definitely go ahead and do so down in the description below. Thank you for joining me today on the tier list. Another very fun video to make, and I hope that everyone has a wonderful night. We'll catch you all in the next video. Thank you.